Good morning, everybody, and a happy Monday morning to you. As I told you guys before, we're going to continue with the one video format. We'll see what happens with YouTube after the first of the year. We may have to go back to the two, but let's cross our fingers, okay? All right, you guys, this is a super long video. Royal stuff, non-royal stuff. Let's get busy. Let's go. I want to start off with some comments that you guys made about the Invictus and Betterup, that, the video you saw Saturday. This particular person noted that the staff at Archwell, Betterup, and Invictus have all been leaving basically because they are taking Harry's advice. This subscriber pointed out that Betterup, Travelist, Archwell, and Soho House all seem to be the same group of highly suspect people providing nothing except the means to divert funds. I happen to agree with that statement. That was a spot-on statement. And finally, this subscriber of mine pointing out that Harry quitting his job has not been good for his mental health. And I happen to agree with that statement also. All right, let's move on. We're going to start off by jumping into this story that really caught my attention because everybody seems to think that Sandringham staying there is just so glamorous and it's just so fabulous. But there's 45 family members there in Norfolk this year, and they don't have enough room. The estate sleeps between 16 to 18 people. So some guests have to make do with shared rooms and what they call fish finger style beds. So the article goes, they kick the staff out of their quarters. No, I'm sure the staff would rather stay with their families at Christmas time anyway. So they turn some of the staff quarters into guest rooms, and then they use these things called fish finger beds. They're very old-fashioned beds. They're very creaky bed springs, they say. So in other words, ain't nothing going on there. And that's how they managed to do it. They managed to basically put everybody into one room. Now, this was one of the first houses where they're staying in England to have gas lights, flushing toilets, and working showers in the 1870s. And it still has its Edwardian interiors. I just think that's lovely. Now, also on the estate there is Amer Hall, which is the country home of Prince and Princess of Wales. So actually, they could stay at their home and just come over in the morning, spend the day, and then go back to their home. You know what I'm saying? All right, let's move on. Next up is Charles Spencer. This guy really irritates me because, when Diana was in the middle of her divorce, she asked to move back to the family home, and Charles Spencer told her no. But he has absolutely no problem dining out on the memory of his sister. He consistently gives interviews that are unnecessary. He says, I go to visit my sister's grave pretty much every day. Christmas Eve was no exception. Then he shared a photo of the temple that he had built at the ancestral home on his Instagram going, my favorite bench, a good place to sit on Christmas Eve during a quiet moment. He's as bad as Harry is. Constantly referencing Diana. Now, back in October, he gave an interview to Good Morning Britain, and that's when he said, I visit her every day, and last week one of her closest childhood friends came and was on the island, and that was so nice. Well, maybe her friend didn't want anybody to know she was there. He had Diana buried there because that way the boys could visit their mother in peace. Williams brought Catherine there. Harry brought Meghan Markle there. But he charges money for people to come in and walk around the Oval and go to the temple that he had done and all that kind of stuff. He is dining out on her memory, and he is making money off of her memory. He's no better than Harry, as I said. All right, let's move on. Next up, the King's Christmas speech, which I thought was lovely. But what it showed was, the article says, a new royal quote-unquote A-team. He excluded significant names. He never mentioned Prince Harry, Meghan Markle, Prince Andrew. But to be fair, he really didn't mention a bunch of other people either. He basically expressed pride in the UK's response to the recent riots. He paid homage to medical staff who helped him and Catherine, the Princess of Wales, during their cancer treatments. But he did put in video clips of William and Sophie and Edward and the Duke and Duchess of Gloucester and Catherine and all of them, but nothing with the rest of them. First of all, Andrew hasn't done any work for the royal family this year, so they wouldn't have mentioned him, and neither is Harry and neither is Meghan. But the person making these comments is Tessa Dunlap. We've talked about her. She met her husband when he was 12. And then later on, okay, in my opinion, she groomed him. She's going to say no. I say yes, she's a pedo. That's just my personal opinion. She's the one that if you go on TV with her, she talks over everybody. She actually at one point put her hand over somebody's mouth. She's a joke. But she also pointed out that Andrew and Harry were nowhere to be seen. And for that, the king has made up a mind about how to act for the good of all, which I find interesting because she's massive Harry and Meghan fan. Massive. Always making comments about how the king should overlook everything they've done and bring them back into the royal fold and forgive them, and the UK needs them, blah, blah, blah. I'm not kidding. These are things she said. So I don't know why she's done a complete about face, but this is really a joke. He wouldn't have mentioned Andrew and Harry for the simple fact that they're not working royals. She just tries to build something out of nothing. All right, let's move on. Now, in not going to Sandringham, remember, Harry and Meghan were invited every year, and every year they found an excuse not to go, from saying Archie was too little and then flying off to Elton John to their move to California and saying it's not safe. They've had a gazillion excuses, but the truth of the matter is, it is a literal golden ticket. Harry used to love to go open presents on Christmas Eve with the family, walk to church the next day, then you have the Christmas lunch, then you have the Boxing Day shoot, and there's lots of parties and games going on, and instead, he's been sitting in his mansion in Montecito with Meghan, and they've decided not to invite him anymore because you don't know if he's taping. You don't know what's going on with him. He's crapped on the family so much. You really can't blame them. So I don't call it a royal family snub. I'm just saying the royal family's had enough. All right, before we move on, I had to touch on this article. They're saying that it could be a master stroke that Harry and Meghan have decided to split. Meghan's going to do all of her solo work. I think it is a master stroke for Harry. I think Harry might be working on rehabbing his image, but nobody wants anything to do with Meghan. She hasn't figured that out yet. All right, let's move on. All right, next up, for some reason, the Oprah show and things that they've said in Oprah and Netflix keep coming back up because I think they realize how damning these two interviews were, these two things that they did. And so now they're back to trying to change the narrative again. I have a couple of examples. So one of the narratives they're trying to change is that they all went to one of these Remembrance Day events. I believe it was at the Royal Albert Hall. Meghan was there with Harry and, everybody was there. And what they were basically saying is there's an issue when you marry in and you're supposed to be the supporting act and then you steal the limelight and you're doing the job better than the person born into it. That's right. That's what they said. So they're sitting there the next day at Buckingham Palace and they're sitting there at breakfast and Meghan opens up the magazine and she goes, "Oh my God, but it's not my fault," because Harry and Meghan were on the front page of several publications and apparently it overshadowed the other royals. It wasn't me, it was just my star power. You get it? And of course, we all know there were witnesses that Catherine was the one in tears, but Meghan says, no, it was Catherine that made me cry. And of course, Harry's trying to change the narrative again and released private text messages, which in my opinion were not rude. Catherine was just saying, listen, this dress is no good. It's absolutely no good. And it's going to not, your wedding won't be perfect. You know what I'm saying? And that this... They're trying to make it, once again, say that Catherine made Meghan cry, which I don't believe for a second. I think we all know Catherine's character at this point. We all know about her. It was absolutely the other way around. Well, most of you know I've done numerous deep dives into the Netflix docuseries. I have brought up inconsistencies, and you know me, I always brought my receipts. I brought proof of everything that I said. And I was on Twitter the other day, and Princess Sparkle, had some more clips, and I found even more consistencies, and maybe that's why they're coming out with this narrative. So listen to this.
What if we moved to Canada?
We thought it would be good to give ourselves some breathing space, but also we were really passionate about continuing our work throughout the Commonwealth to support the Queen.
Well, and also I think what's important is the pack of the Royal Rota is based there in London. So if we're not there, they can't cover what we're doing. You guys can be on the front pages of all the papers. You have it exactly the way you want it. And we can just go about doing the work in the name of the Queen.
If you want us to go and do things on behalf of the Queen, we'll go and do it. And we'll pay for it ourselves. We don't want to be dependent on any taxpayer funding. Guess what? You get us for free. And this was years in the making. We really wanted to remove the supposed public interest argument that the press had over every element of our lives.
Now, I want to point something out to you that you just heard. Let me play it for you again. Listen carefully.
And we'll pay for it ourselves. We don't want to be dependent on any taxpayer funding. Guess what? You get us for free. And this was years in the making.
So here's the two things that I think you guys might not have heard. Number one, we're going to do this for free. We're not going to take the taxpayer-funded money. Well, the taxpayer-funded money only was 5% of their income. The rest of the money came from King Charles. So basically, they wanted to step away from the family, work for the Queen, and have Daddy fund an extravagant lifestyle. Here's the second thing they said when they were talking about moving to Canada.
This was years in the making.
Years in the making. They married in May of 2018 and stepped back. Before then, their last engagements were March of 2020. So if anything, that tells you that absolutely from the get-go, they were planning on leaving. We also found out at that time that they tried to sign up with Quibi, a streaming service. They were doing other things behind the scenes. Now, there's one more soundbite I want to play for you.
That day, a story that came out saying that part of the reason why Meghan and I were leaving was because William had bullied us out. Once I got in the car after the meeting, I was told about a joint statement that had been put out in my name and my brother's name, squashing the story about him bullying us out of the family. I couldn't believe it. No one had asked me. No one had asked me permission to put my name to a statement like that. And I rang Em and I told her, and she burst into floods of tears because within 4 hours they were happy to lie to protect my brother. And yet, for 3 years, they were never willing to tell the truth to protect us.
Suddenly, what clicked in my head was, it's never going to stop. Every rumor, every negative thing, every lie, everything that I knew wasn't true and that the palace knew wasn't true and internally they knew wasn't true, that was just being allowed to fester.
So there was no other option at this point. I said, we need to get out of here.
So the first thing I want you to get from that clip is Harry is saying that William did bully him and Meghan out of the family. They left because William bullied them. They were willing to put out a statement that I didn't agree on to cover up for my father. They were willing to lie to protect him. So that's what he said. They bullied us out. Now, did you catch the other thing that Meghan said?
Rumor, every negative thing, every lie, everything that I knew wasn't true and that the palace knew wasn't true and internally they knew wasn't true, that was just being allowed to fester.
So what Meghan wanted, first of all, the palace did come out and they did refute a ton of articles. Obviously, I can't put them all here because there's hundreds of them. But they did come out and they did refute a lot of the stories. But what Meghan wanted was anytime anything was said that wasn't nice or flattering, she wanted the palace to come out in her defense. And that's just not something that they can do. Now, what I'm shocked about is that the palace did lie because they came out with statements saying that there was nothing going on between Catherine and Meghan Markle. Obviously, we found out since then that it's true. But they were trying to protect Meghan's reputation. Then, of course, we found out about the lies where Meghan said the palace wouldn't help her. And then we found out later on that the palace actually offered her assistance, and she's the one who said, I don't want it. Then there was the whole bullying thing, which the palace came out and said, no, no, no. And then, of course, we found out after they left that an investigation had to be done because she was bullying people. Absolutely. But here's things that the palace denied, like the palace denied that they were doing an interview with Ellen DeGeneres. The palace denied that they were working with a celebrity endorsement company. The palace denied that they were seeking endorsements. I think behind the scenes they were. But the palace didn't know what Harry and Meghan were doing during those 18 months that they worked. They didn't know what they were doing behind the scenes. Yeah, I think they were. I think they misled the palace. So there you go. All right, let's move on. Now, also in the Netflix docuseries, let's not forget that I think it was the 3rd episode that they just happened to have somebody taping them while they run around the house going, "It's almost 5 in the morning. They're going to wake Archie up. Oh my God, they're circling. What's wrong with these people?" Remember, this is when they were complaining about drones. A source told Tom Sykes from the Daily Beast that Harry and Meghan had been coping with, quote, unimaginable levels of press intrusion at their temporary new home, and that they were going to hire their own security team paid for by themselves. Well, we found out later on that it was a spokesperson for Harry and Meghan who gave the information. They even gave them the address where they were living, while the cops told, Mr. Sykes they wouldn't give any information as it violated privacy laws. The Freedom of Information request was then logged. When he logged that Freedom of Information request, he suddenly got outed. So he in turn outed his source for the information, which was a representative for Harry and Meghan. So essentially, Harry and Meghan undercut their own credibility by being totally involved. I always wonder what Tyler Perry thought of that, because most people who watched the Netflix thought, "Oh my God, I feel so bad for Harry and Meghan." But to launch an attack at Buckingham Palace and accuse staffers of leaking stories to the media and even senior members of the family, and then come to find out you're leaking the information, yeah, that doesn't come off well. That Freedom of Information document was proof that Harry and Meghan are, talking in a bid to slam Queen Elizabeth, who had been involved in the decision to strip them of their taxpayer-funded security. Harry's going on in the Netflix documentary. We've heard him in interviews. There's leaking, but there's planting. Well, now we know who's really doing the leaking and the planning. And it's my personal opinion that when they couldn't get what they wanted, they used Omid Scobie. We know that Omid Scobie helped with Finding Freedom. We know that Omid Scobie named Catherine and Charles as royal racists. It's the same thing over and over. Now, finally, because Harry's court case is coming up soon where he's, crying foul about his security, articles are really coming out calling Harry and Meghan absolute hypocrites for their fake royal tours. You cannot complain about security and call the UK dangerous, but then travel to Nigeria and Colombia. So obviously something else is keeping Harry from bringing Meghan Markle home. And I think that something is Meghan Markle. Remember, these tours that the royal family takes are to build diplomatic and trade alliances on behalf of government. So what exactly are Harry and Meghan doing? Because they don't work for the government. But the articles pointed out that if you're going to go to Nigeria and Colombia, where there is huge socioeconomic problems, and you're turning up wearing tens of thousands of pounds in designer clothing and jewelry, that doesn't send the right message. Now, it was about that time 8 months ago, we found out Harry and Meghan were going to Nigeria, and the British envoy in Nigeria, Dr. Richard Montgomery, came out very quickly and said that the British High Commission was not involved in arranging or facilitating Harry and Meghan's visit. He gave an interview and he said they are visiting in a private capacity. They are not representing the work of the British government during the visit, and that, this is not an official visit. So the British High Commission was not involved in arranging or facilitating their program. He made it very clear they're not representing the King or the Queen. It was a private visit. He couldn't have gone out of his way anymore to make sure that people understood Harry and Meghan were not doing this for the UK. And we all know what happened. Everything was very carefully set up and controlled. They had the red carpet rolled out for them. Meghan was anointed a Nigerian princess. I still find it absolutely hilarious that the Defense Department invited Harry and Meghan there, but never asked for proof of her 43 or 47% Nigerian heritage that she claims she found out about. Remember, she took over the Invictus Games with that. She took over the whole Nigerian tour with that. Well, another video came out. My issue with this video is that I couldn't prove it, but here's what it says. Supposedly, allegedly, since the tour, a senior Nigerian military official spoke out about the fake royal tour and questioned Harry and Meghan's credibility. He said that the high-ranking officials were led to believe this was an official royal tour by Harry and Meghan. They were making elaborate security arrangements, coordinating with various departments, only to discover this was not a sanctioned royal tour, that the British High Commission was not involved. They said that they received official documentation. The general then produced a folder of questionable documentation where everything looked legitimate, letterhead, seals, signatures. But it began to unravel with a routine verification check with the British High Commission. And then they put out the statement that I just showed you that said this was not an official tour. The palace had no knowledge of it. The information suggests that Harry and Meghan put a lot of demands on the Nigerian government, and the tour was in the making for a considerable amount of time, and people are upset and said that, the demands they made were insane. Now, credit went at the end of the information to something called Royal Trend, but I was unable to verify it. But if this is true, that would just be bombshell. You know what I mean? Crazy. All right, you guys. Yes, I know that was long. I need lots of comments. I'm reading them, as you can tell. So don't forget to hit the like and the subscribe button and the thumbs up button. Then go down into the description box where you'll find the link to my Twitter, my Gettr, my Rumble, my email, my Patreon, which is currently paused, and my Amazon wish list. For those of you who've donated to my coffee fund, thank you so much. And as always, you guys, have a great day.